British Prime Minister Boris Johnson leaves a Brexit meeting with EU officials to loud jeers. His host, Luxembourg's Prime Minister Xavier Bettel, seems similarly unhappy, and not just because his counterpart left him alone to face the cameras.
For me, I just have one withdrawal agreement on the table, and it's the one from last year. There are no changes. There are no concrete proposals for the moment on the table. And I won't give an agreement to ideas. We need written proposals, and the time is ticking.
Johnson was in Luxembourg for his first face-to-face meeting with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker since taking office. Like Bettel, Juncker has said Johnson failed to present alternatives to the current Brexit deal the UK Parliament has rejected 3 times. Speaking away from the angry crowds, Johnson says the government already has a rough idea on what a new agreement would look like. But he says a smooth exit is not his main priority.
I think we've got actually just the right amount of time to do a deal between now and the 17th, 18th of October. But as I never tire of telling you, if we can't do a deal by then, and obviously we want to work very hard to do it, if we can't do it by then we'll make sure that we can come out on the 31st of October, deal or no deal.
How Johnson intends to achieve that is unclear. The UK Parliament has passed a law forcing the government to delay Brexit to 2020 if a new deal with Brussels remains elusive. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's go to Andrew Watt, the Deputy Director of the Macroeconomic Policy Institute at the Hans-Bockler Foundation. He joins us now from Dusseldorf in Germany. Welcome to Money Talks, Andrew. Now, there was a lot of anticipation ahead of Boris Johnson's trip to Luxembourg, but subsequently he walked away with nothing. What was he hoping to achieve?
Good evening, first of all. Well, I think there may have been a lot of anticipation in the UK. I think opinions on the continent are now quite jaded, to be honest with you, and I don't think the anticipation here was very high at all. And I think what we've seen today is confirmed suspicions that Johnson doesn't really have a clear strategy. He seems to be, pushing things to the brink and hoping that something's going to turn up. And it's really not clear, as you also said, what the outcome will now be. The talks will continue with the European Commission. But we're so close to the deadline now, and there's these talks of technical solutions, a border solution that exists nowhere else in the world for the inner Irish border. And how this is going to materialize in a matter of a few days is really anybody's guess.
Yes, we've just got 6 weeks to go until the October the 31st Brexit deadline. From the EU's perspective, what do they think Boris Johnson's strategy is? Do they think that he's simply running down the clock until then?
I think they're genuinely confused. You know, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is sending out quite strong signals to his domestic audience and is maybe not aware, although of course he should be, that these domestic signals of strength and willing to take it to the wire are also being picked up in Brussels and in Luxembourg and all the national capitals. So I think there is genuine confusion in European capitals and with the European Commission as to his strategy.
Now, it's now 26 days since Boris Johnson met Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, promising that he'll come up with a viable alternative to the Irish backstop that Johnson wants removed from the current agreement that's on the table. Do you think Boris Johnson seriously is looking at an alternative? Do you think he'll come up with one?
As I said, it's really anybody's guess, but it's hard to see what his end game will be if he doesn't have a solution. You know, will he really take it to the wire? He's been obliged now by a law passed by the British Parliament to seek an extension if he doesn't have a deal. But he's suggested quite openly that he would find a way around this obligation. And if he does that, quite frankly, we will have a very serious constitutional crisis in the UK, which I think will really bring out the population also against the current government. And who knows what could come of that. The other alternative is that he does, in fact, ask for extension. If he does, the European Union will only grant it if there is a general election called. That seems quite clear, a general election or a referendum, but probably a general election. The opposition parties, which so far have objected to calling an election because they're afraid of having a new deal, they will then agree to have a general election. And then, in a sense, the British people will get another chance to decide how they want to proceed with this Brexit project.
Interesting. So if Boris Johnson does go to Brussels asking for an extension if they don't come up with a deal before then, do you think that the EU might agree to one only with strings attached then?
I think that's fairly clear now. I mean, Mr. Vettel, the Luxembourg Prime Minister, gave voice, I think, to a quite serious degree of frustration now on the part of European leaders. And in the past, they've actually said they would only grant an extension if there was a material ground for doing so. In a sense, there wasn't really one, but they gave one anyway. But I think this time, really, it's time to insist that a clear exit strategy is in place. And that can only take the form now, I think, of a general election. Okay,
now let's quickly look at the economic impact, because there's been a lot of modelling around the impact on the UK economy if the UK were to crash out of the EU without a deal. Could there be also an impact on the European economy in that event?
In case of crashing out without a deal, there would certainly be an impact. Indeed, it will be a lot weaker just because of the relative size. Compared with the UK, but it will be perceptible and it will be clearly negative. If the European economy were really booming, we may not be so concerned about it. The quantitative effects that our modelling shows and that other institutes' modelling shows are not on their own so large. But of course, we have a series of headwinds facing the European economy at the moment. The trade conflicts between the US and China, for example, big problems, particularly in Germany, but in other parts of Europe too, with the automobile sector. Now, most recently, the spike in oil prices and the tensions in the Middle East. So the European economy is not in a very robust state just at the moment to cope with another negative shock, which will come in the case of a no deal.
Sounds like that both sides have a lot to lose in the event of a no-deal Brexit. Andrew Watt, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you for joining us from Dusseldorf in Germany.